Betsy and Thomas here. Thomas, tell me about these two articles that you just read about the Australians and the New Zealanders, their governments, supporting the Clinton Foundation. This is just amazing because on top of everything else that we're finding out, now we're that the Queen has interfered with our 2016 U.S. elections. Now it turns out that other governments have as well. What did you find out?
Oh, well, that we just made reference to it, and that's what Trump is insinuating here. That's why he quoted Mark Penn about the foundation, and then he quoted the other things. That what is really happening is in Australia, we know that Alexander Downer, the man who turned in the false report about George Papadopoulos, who actually was a setup, and it was set up with Joseph Mifsud, who was a friend of his, because they all worked together in the Cambridge Intelligence Seminar and the CSI and the SCL and all these different groups. So the point is that Australia gave $27 million to the Clinton Foundation for AIDS. And when we were talking a minute ago, we were just saying that all they do is stand in the middle and they reduce the pharmaceutical drugs amount of they charge for the AIDS drug. That's all they did. And they got $27 million. But look closely, Alexander Downer I believe he stepped down. A number of these people have stepped down just recently, like Robert, the head of the British NSA. Hannigan stepped down 3 days after the election. When Trump won, they all knew they were done in. So Alexander Downer had arranged as High Commissioner to Britain. Let me repeat that. The Australian High Commissioner to Britain had arranged for $80 million to go to the Clinton Foundation, if you look closely. Not just the $27 million that they've been caught recently for. Now it's come out that New Zealand also, in the same fashion, gave, over time, $17.3 million to the Clinton Foundation.
Now, is this their governments? I mean, their taxpayers.
Tax money.
Their taxpayers gave money to the government, then the government decided the best use for that was to give it to the Clinton Foundation? Am I getting that right?
That is correct. And remember, Clinton Foundation has been investigated by the standard foundation investigators, and they find that they spend less than 5% of the money they're given on the cause. Less than 5% of the money. They admit that, and they say, well, there are many foundations that spend less than 10%. That was Hillary's response. Okay, so then we find out it's not only Australia and New Zealand were giving this money, but we also know of other money like the Russians gave. Oleg Deripaska gave millions of dollars along with George Soros. $10 million was given to Daniel Jones, the previous intelligence staffer of Dianne Weinstein when she was in the Senate Intelligence Committee and stepped down after she released the Glenn Simpson.
It's Dianne Feinstein.
What did I say?
Weinstein.
Weinstein? Oh, sorry. That's a Freudian slip. Dianne Weinstein? Oh, say it again.
Dianne Feinstein.
Weinstein? Oh, sorry. Rico? Sorry.
Yeah.
This is Rico? Oh, Rico? Is it someone Rico named
Isn't that great? Oh, no. Say something about that because people are going to want to know why
Clinton
you say
Foundation is racketeering. It's
okay,
Rico.
But so is the papers that were filed against Weinstein.
And so is the RICO of the group that Daniel Jones runs called Penn.
These are international racketeering groups, and we're just calling them out what they are.
Penn Quarter Group took $10 million directly from a Russian, Oleg Deripaska, the great aluminum giant. Oh, aluminum comes up again. Aluminum tariffs?
Very
and
interesting.
then George Soros just gave money to this opposition research group that continued to hire Christopher Steele, which means Christopher Steele, who was in direct contact with Sir Richard Dearlove, who was in direct contact with the Privy Council, and Sir Geoffrey Patty, who was in direct contact with the Queen and controls her golden shares. Yes, folks, we're talking about the Queen and all of her Commonwealth. One more thing I have to add here very quickly, and that's Canada. Of the Five Eyes, let's name them. Was Britain involved? Yes. Was Australia involved? Yes. Gave to the Clinton Foundation, let's just call it $27 million. Was New Zealand involved? Yes. Gave to the Clinton Foundation $17 million. Was Canada involved? Yes, because Aggregate IQ was the group that created the program that manipulated and mind-bended people's political views during not only Brexit, and was used by by a Strategic Communications Laboratory, which is, one of their groups is now gone defunct, and that is Sir Geoffrey Patty. He controls CSL and all of its different subsidiaries, which is more than you can even take time to listen to today if I listed all of them.
But you and Michael McKibben are going to get on real soon and have some really great discussions about these topics.
Well, what I should mention now is that everything I'm saying...
It's all backed up. We've got the proof.
Look at Truth News headlines today. The blockbuster article we told you was coming out from Americans for Innovation, it's out, and it gives you all the proof that you have time to read and more, because our researchers and their researchers and all these researchers have all put this together, and this is the indictable information to literally say, poke out 4 of the 5 eyes. And by the way, I was going to say this the other day, and I got interrupted by myself, and it is, the 6th eye is Israel, and the 6th eye uses what are called stingrays. Stingrays intercept every communication in Washington, D.C. They've now found that they are in hundreds of locations. There's nowhere in Washington, D.C. that your cell phone, encrypted or not, is not being intercepted. And who do you think is intercepting it? Who always ends up being caught being the one intercepting it? And then we say, oh, well, they're like the 6th eye. It's okay, we don't mind. Folks, Britain's not our friend. New Zealand's not our friend. Australia's not our friend. Canada's not our friend. And that we share intelligence with them, and Israel's not our friend. That we share intelligence with them, and that we allow them to build our microchips. That we allow Talpiot, a weaponized group that comes in that has more tech startups than any other country in the world. This is a war, and America has been sold out. We don't need 5 eyes. We need to go back to having one good eye.
Like Odin's? So let me back up for a minute. But let me say this. It's sort of like in the South when a hurricane's coming. Honey, you batten up those hatches. You're putting the tape on your windows. You're sealing it up. And that's what we have to do. The world has become this, and we need to close our borders in the United States and get back to being America again, getting all these foreign interests out of our country.
Crossfire Hurricane, you named it, batten down the hatches.
Yeah.
Jumpin' Jack Flash is here.
Yeah.
What they tried to do as a joke, they need to realize that Trump is Jumpin' Jack Flash. He is the Thunderbird of America. He is the flaming phoenix the direct eclipse that crossed our entire nation, probably for one of the first ones ever. And another one is coming soon during his time. That's him. That's who he is.
And it's important for Americans to do that because the world is counting on us, because we do need to go help other citizens that are being terrorized by their own governments through the corruption that we see that goes all the way back, again, to the Queen. Now, for those of you who will write me something in the bottom and go, what about the Vatican and what about the this and the that? Look, there's a plan for each of them. Let's just work the plan.
The Queen takes a vow of fealty to the head of the Knights of Malta. Now, it's usually been a relative of hers, and so she didn't mind doing it. But now, the Jesuit Pope has replaced the old knight, the head of the Knights of Malta, with someone new who she is not too hot about. So what is really going on here is the oldest institutions in the world, the Vatican and the British East India Company, which became the imperialism of the British nation and later became UK, the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom Commonwealth. What really was going on there, that was a corporate control of the world. And the Queen is, what would she be? Chief Executive Officer?
No,
or is
she's the
President of the board?
She's the Grand Mistress of the Earth Plantation.
And boy, when you see what she really owns, you will realize that we are definitely commoners.
These are not exaggerations. It is what it is. Now, I do want to have one more question before we go, because we talked about this the other day about George Soros. I want to know who's protecting him. He runs around this globe creating havoc. We all know about it. How come he's not locked up? Who's protecting him? And it has to be somebody who's at a higher pecking order than he is.
The Vulcans, and what has transformed into what we call the rogue CIA, which is really the Bush White House criminal mafia cabal, whatever you want to call it. The rogue CIA works out of Azerbaijan, and that's the reason that the weapons that are taken in to support ISIS came out of Azerbaijan and Silkway Airlines. When the Azerbaijan Chamber of Commerce was set up, it was basically the headquarters then of what had become a rogue CIA led by George H.W. Bush Sr., when he was the vice president. He led the takedown of the USSR by an economic terroristic activity. And we could go into Ambassador Leo Wanta, and George Soros, who were the open financiers who acted as if they were, they weren't part of this. But what happened was a complete fleecing of the USSR, and then later it happened again with the satellite countries that broke away from the USSR, broke away from what is now Russia. So Russia and all the nations around it have been fleeced over and over. And when you look at the revolutions, the color revolutions, then they went even into Asia, and now they've gone into the Balkans, and they went into Macedonia and Montenegro, and now Albania.
Well, how do we take the Vulcans out?
Well,
if they're the ones protecting George Soros and we need him to be removed from the playing field, how do we take the Vulcans out? Do we identify them?
Well, the Vulcans control the major shares of what is called the rogue CIA gold. And that is a huge amount of gold. And so they use that gold, and they lease that gold, and they manipulate that gold, and they release it sometimes into the market. But when they do, if they released it too quickly, it would collapse the gold market. And then what they had is their holdings wouldn't be valuable. So they open up dummy companies like Blackstone. They take over companies like T. Rowe. They take over Vanguard. But who were the initial people? Those were Brits and Germans and Dutch families, the Warburgs, the Lehman Brothers, the Solomon, the Rothschilds. These are people who came over as bankers from Britain, from really the central banks of Britain, of Denmark, and of Holland, of Germany. That was the Dutch East India Company, the British East India Company, and the German traders. And they basically ruled the world. They were more powerful than nations, and they were corporations, so they had to then be tamed, and they were turned into basically the imperialism of those particular nations, which, of course, those are the people who were fighting over America, weren't they, including the French. And the French were because of the Rothschild influence that then went into 5 nations after the Central Bank of Britain was established.
So we need to go after the banksters? Is that who we need to target?
We would have to tumble the central banks, because then that would tumble the control of the stock market. Or you could just tumble the stock market. If you tumbled the stock market and the U.S. Federal Reserve, you would change the face of the economy of the world. And there's ways to do this with hardly a hiccup. Because if we created our own basket of commodities, because we happen to have the most commodities, and if we then seized the gold in the Bank of Zurich, and we made the Bank of Zurich tell us who owned that gold, and then we seized those assets that were the assets stolen after World War II.
And let's make sure to seize the assets of the Clinton Foundation while we're at it. Sorry.
Oh, yes. And
how about the assets of the Queen? I bet she has a pretty good stash.
All offshore
and she
holdings.
I think we need to officially name her enemy of humanity, because it doesn't just affect the United States. People all over the world are suffering because of this regime.
People of Britain, if you want to get really mad at your queen, get ready for what I'm about to tell you. Take a look at the jewels in the crown jewels again. Take a very close look at them.
Are
They've
they
been
fake?
replaced.
Oh, they have been. She said to sell them off to keep up the estates? No.
That, as well as she holds many of them in offshore accounts, because she's stolen all the wealth of all nations that she, part of the Commonwealth, and put it into offshore accounts. And so nobody really knows how much wealth she has or where the wealth is. But the point is that her wealth goes right into Lockheed Martin. It goes into the largest military industrial complexes in America that gain U.S. tax dollars. It goes into U.S. aid that goes to foreign countries, actually ends up in the pocket of the crown agents. OPEC oftentimes goes to British-based companies, or they go to countries where the Brits own everything, so no matter how much we pour into those countries, we're pouring it into the pockets of British companies. So if you just stand back and look at this, Serco is now going bankrupt because of $80 billion in fraud against Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. SCL, Strategic Communications Laboratories, one of their major groups, has gone belly up. Cambridge Analytica in America has gone belly up. SEL in America, USA, has gone up. Aggregate
That shows
IQ,
progress then, doesn't it?
it shows there's a lot of progress. We are seeing amazing things happen at this point. And so that the corruption of the Clinton Foundation, if these new investigators who went to Little Rock for the first time, they actually went to Little Rock where the fake foundations were created even before the Clinton Library Foundation. I thought...
You mean they went to the scene of the crime?
Correct.
Well, who told them to do that?
They went to Rose Law Firm where patent theft has been the way that America has been run since the 70s. And
Well, they can't create because they have little reptile brains. They have no imagination, so they have to steal from the rest of us.
well, I just got a note from one of our researchers that David Kapos, who headed the U.S. Patent Office and had worked for IBM for many years before, decades, works directly for Serco, for the Queen.
Hello? And he ran our U.S. Patent Office, which of course is run by Serco, which of course is the Queen. People, hello, wake up!
It's unbelievable what we've discovered. And so as these things are falling, the dominoes, if anyone looks close, as we say, someone in first-year law school could prosecute Hillary Clinton and her crimes and her foundation. But what I was just about to point out is, as Obama has taken his $2 billion that he forced out of Silicon Valley to give to him for his library and tied it up by trying to steal the nicest park in Chicago, which will now be tied up in court, maybe forever, that causes all of his library to not be FOIA-able. You cannot do a Freedom of Information Act on the library because it's in transition, and they can't find the documents. He did this on purpose, just as he had his own records sealed. So, what happened with Clinton? He learned that from Clinton. Clinton took their library and made it into a foundation. But I found out accidentally because our great researchers, and particularly Michael McKibben, said, hello, here's the list of their prior foundations in Arkansas that they had been rolling it all into anyway. So anyone who wants to look at the Clinton Foundation has to look at over 24 corrupt foundations, and it goes back to before he even became president. And this is the kind of corruption that they're investigating now in Little Rock, Arkansas. If they cannot convict Bill and Hillary Clinton, there is no justice left in America. And it's nothing but fake justice. And then it's time for the people to rise up and do something
No,
about
the people are rising up because we're really sick and tired of this. We're fed up. And like never before, we can send out this message and people all around the world get it at the same time. It does change consciousness. And so the purpose of this was we have found an amazing amount of evidence that shows us that what we are saying is accurate and true. But as we push this out, our researchers are continuing to bring up more and more stuff. It is not going to go away. It's just going to get bigger.
Previously, it was oil. That's the reason Daddy Bush was part of Zapata Oil, which was a cover for the CIA. He was part of the CIA. He was. You see his picture of him on the booked depository building. He was arrested twice that day, and he called in and made two formal records that day, and he was advertised as being in that city that day. But it was oil before that, and he learned that from Edwin Pauley. And I don't want to go into all the history of the Dawes brothers, but I mean of Dawes, Secretary of State Dawes, but that's where they learned this from. They learned to control oil because oil was the big thing. Then when George Bush was in office and he became president, he said, whoa, wait a second, it's arms. So he became a member of the Carlyle Group afterwards, 400 subsidiary organizations under Carlyle, all of them for arms, defense, military, KBR. Half of the soldiers in Iraq were Halliburton soldiers. They were mercenaries. George Bush was on the Carlyle Group at that time. Those were no-bid contracts. Halliburton, KBR, all those groups were sued over and over again. So what did he do the first year that he joined Carlyle? He jumped in for the arms trade with Adnan Khashoggi, but Adnan Khashoggi had, with someone the previous year, Peter Monk, had bought 2 dead gold mines in America, in the Southwest. And Bush sold it to them for next to nothing. Afterwards, he got caught, and they raised the price, and Adnan Khashoggi, the largest arms dealer in the world, had to pay a little bit more for them. And then 2 years later, that company, Barrick Gold, becomes the number one gold producer in the world. Woo! Selling more paper gold than anybody has ever sold in human history. When I say paper gold, that means when you buy a 501k gold stock, you're not buying gold, you're buying gold paper.
501k, 401k.
401k. Sorry.
Okay.
When you're in your 401k from your payroll deduction, which is
Okay, go on.
often
move on.
matched by your
Right.
company, that goes into
Which is all a
stocks.
bunch of fraud anyway. Don't get me started with this 401k stuff.
But it goes into
Right.
it goes into
We're the government. We're here to help you save money, right? And help you for your retirement.
So
Yeah.
if you're buying gold and silver, get it physically. But the point is then Daddy Bush got involved with Barrick Gold. They faked all this gold, and now they say they have a gold mine in Switzerland. There's no gold in Switzerland. But they pull it up out of the ground, take it to the Zurich Gold Depository, where you can have numbered gold accounts now. You can't have numbered Swiss
What
accounts
do you mean
anymore.
they pull it out of the ground? They've got all the stolen gold, and they use this
It's a
Barrick
lie.
Gold as a front.
It's a lie.
It's a front because they have to. It has to be seem like it comes from someplace. It doesn't. It was all stolen.
Exactly. This is the stolen gold after World War II that was in the Philippines, was being hidden in the Philippines, and we got it. That's the reason Imelda Marcos is still being paid tens of millions of dollars for the gold we stole from her and her husband. Okay? That came from China, Japan, it came from the whole East, and it came from the gold, from the half of the gold that didn't go to the Bank for International Settlements from the Germans, which stole it from the French and the Spanish, who had some of the largest gold deposits. So those went into Switzerland, and then that gold was stolen and it was taken to the Philippines. And then we, after the war, we got a hold of that gold. The part of the gold is called the Yamashita gold. Another part is called the Hammer Project and the Nazi gold. But the point is, it doesn't even matter how much there is. The point is, that gold helped found some of our biggest companies on our stock market, and that gold is being hidden in the Zurich numbered gold vault, which is at the Zurich airport. And Barrick Gold, my joke was that all of a sudden they have a gold mine in Switzerland producing like the third largest amount of gold or fourth largest amount of gold in the world, which is right near where they just have to drive it over and put it into the vault in the Zurich gold vault. What a joke, just as you said. It's stolen gold. It was probably, they didn't even have to move it. It was there to begin with. They're just lying. And then what happens? We now find out that the Nova Scotia Bank and what's that company in Canada that is the number one gold bank where you can actually buy supposedly real gold. They went into both those vaults and there's no gold there. And so what we're finding is it was oil for the presidents, and then it was gold. And then it was uranium. Bill Clinton got in on the uranium even while he was president, because as Bush was going out, he set up the Russia megatons for megawatts uranium scam.
And then it was going to be carbon credits.
And then it was going to be carbon credits. That was going to be our new International
Yes.
Monetary Fund special drawing rights. That was going to be the new world currency, was carbon footprint. Carbon credits. So, yes, that's what Obama was setting up. That's the reason he's so upset. And that's the reason that they allowed the vice president, the guy who invented the myth of climate warming, Al Gore. That's the reason he was going to get a huge percentage of all of that. He was going to become a billionaire. Because why? He was supposed to be the president and he got cheated. So, let's go back. So, it went from gold to uranium. From oil to gold.
What happened to arms? You had mentioned arms.
Well,
in
arms
there.
is always in there because whoever
Okay.
the Secretary of the State is, they get pay to play,
Okay.
and the president gets if they have their own offshore accounts. Which
What are you saying? Pompeo's doing that now?
there's always money for arms, but right now Trump isn't doing that. But always before, anyone who was in control of the State Department was in control of arms sales and control of U.S. aid. In control of U.S. Department of Defense aid. We're talking $100 billion a year we give away to other countries for this nonsense, at the discretion of the Secretary of State. Now, people don't know this, and it may come as a shock to people, but this is the way it works, folks. And the White House sees the flow of money, and then they step in. They get their friends to get loans from the overseas, from OPIC, or they get their friends to step in the flow for USAID, or the Millennium Fund, or this fund, or that fund, and the Crown agents come in. They all get their piece of the pie to just all be complicit and quiet and get their piece of the pie. So then what? And then what are they going after now? They're going after donations of Silicon Valley to their library. And then now look what the Clintons do. $50 million a year to go to what? Netflix. Well, who created Netflix? Without Leader Technologies, scalability for social networking, there would be no Netflix.
And Netflix is just another propaganda arm of the Global Engagement Center or the Bureau of Broadcast Governors.
The Bureau of Broadcast Governors absolutely controls everything
'Cause there's no
broadcast
way
in
that
this country. Absolutely.
There's no way Netflix makes that much money off a subscriber base. They are being funded. And I mean, when I watched this show called The Crown, which is the biggest puff propaganda piece you've ever seen on the Queen, and she has this little segment where John F. Kennedy dies and they go out and ring the bells for an hour and, oh, it's never been done before. You know what? That woman is probably behind JFK being assassinated.
Oh, yeah. Now, Frank Giustra, Bill Clinton's best friend, he's as corrupt as he can be. He got into uranium by buying pretty much a dead mine. And then he tricked people, bought another dead mine in Kazakhstan, and it was Bill Clinton who got him the ability to buy that mine. And then he combined that with what Bill and Hillary worked out to tell Frank Giustra, we're going to get you all the uranium, uranium in these two particular places out in the southwest of America. And we are going to set this up for you, and all you have to do is give us $200 million. And so Frank Giustra, in going from his company, which eventually was called Uranium One, sold it to Rosatom, which is really called 10X. They actually gave $145 million to the Clinton Foundation, the board members of Rosatom and 10X, which is basically the Russian nuclear agency controlled directly by Vladimir Putin. And it was for two dead mines in Kazakhstan and for the United States uranium rights. But what nobody knows, and we're going to tell you, and we only figured this out because of our brilliant friend Michael McKibben, said, Thomas, Oak Ridge is running right now. And I said, no. Oak Ridge cannot be running. Paducah, Kentucky was closed down. Portsmouth was closed down. And Eunice, New Mexico is the only enrichment facility in America, and it's owned by the Queen, by the Dutch, and by the Germans. He says, no, Oak Ridge is running. And I said, impossible. Oak Ridge cannot be running. And then I looked into it and found that they had never even used an enrichment facility that was built. They transformed it, and they used it to take Putin's uranium from our mines to enrich it in our Oak Ridge enrichment facility. And then they cheated through 10AM, and they put Minikin in jail, the head of 10AM, for 10 years of extortion, theft, price gouging, and sending our enriched uranium to Syria, Iran, North Korea, and a host of other enemies. And we busted them, and we actually are the ones who named the very company that was doing this, TLC, out of Paducah, Kentucky, and they were shipping it on their trucks, lying. It was supposed to go to a disposal facility, and they were shipping it out of Canada. So uranium became huge because they were selling it on the open market, enriched in uranium. Enriched in uranium is one of the most expensive substances on the face of the earth. And with it, you can create plutonium, enriched plutonium, which is the second most expensive thing on the face of the earth. So the presidents got involved in wherever the flow of money was. And the Clinton Foundation, it inserts itself not only in between pharmaceutical companies and third world countries to get a cutback, or a kickback, to cut the price to get a kickback, but they also do this for everything. And they did it for mines, for gold, for oil. And so when Frank Giustra joined with Clinton in the Clinton Giustra Sustainability Growth Fund, after Uranium One went through the CFIUS committee, which Hillary Clinton sat on that committee and was supposed to be watching out for us, and after Jeff Sessions turned his back in 3 of his 5 committees to allow this to happen, and when Obama signed off of it, we gave our uranium rights in a fight to Putin and to the Queen. And Frank Juster gave the Clintons $200 million and a promise to give half of all of his proceeds from Goldcorp, his gold company, which is a fake gold company, of course. But they make about $200 million a year, so that's another $100 million a year that he's supposed to give. And that's their profits. He's supposed to give $100 million to Bill a year for the deal that he did for Uranium One. Holy moly, folks! Why is no one talking about that? Why is the biggest crime, overt crime, not being talked about?
Can you see that little fluffy news show called Fox and Friends actually grabbing onto any of this? There is no way mainstream media is going to report this. They will be demised before we get there.
Jesse Waters is drowning in the shallow end. He would have to come up for air.
He's called Jesse Waterwings.
Jesse Waterwings. He would have to pass out if we told him this and slapped his face and say, "I thought you were a stupid reporter."
It's not. It's everybody on Fox News. All they do, they think you're getting cutting edge news. No, you're not. This is where it is right here. Now, that's it. We're ending this audio. Final word.
The final word is Trump doesn't need any of that money. That's why we elected him. He's a capitalist. He doesn't need to go to the White House to do pay for play. Folks, we elected someone who is honest, who is now working for us. We are going to get a balanced budget within 2 years, whether people like it or not.
Folks, check in the description box all these articles we talked about. They're right there below, and you can continue your homework.